A billionaire followed a baby's cry into a dark alley. What he found there changed his life forever. Michael Thompson did not believe in destiny. The success of his 45-year life was the result of calculated decisions, meticulous planning, and a complete absence of emotional impulses. His corporate empire, valued in the billions, was proof that reason, not the heart, should govern every aspect of existence. That night, however, something inexplicable made him stop. It was almost 11 o'clock when he left his penthouse office in the skyscraper that bore his name. As always, and he was the last to leave, the security guards were used to his late departures, and Frank, his driver, knew he had to wait patiently in the parking lot, no matter the hour. "Good night, Mr. Thompson," said the lobby guard, not lifting his eyes from the security monitor. Michael just nodded. Unnecessary words were a waste of time. Upon leaving the building, he decided to dismiss his driver. Something in the autumn night invited him to walk, a rare indulgence in his impeccably timed routine. "Take the night off, old Frank," he said on the phone. "I'm going to walk for a bit." The streets of the financial district were almost deserted. Executives had long since returned to their comfortable suburbs, to families Michael never wanted. In his view, emotional ties were complications that distracted from real achievements. He adjusted his tie as he walked, his Italian shoes crushing dry leaves on the sidewalk. The cold autumn wind rustled his overcoat. Something about this solitary walk perfectly reflected his life, organized, lonely, and filled only by the echo of his own footsteps. That was when he heard it. A sound so out of place on that silent street that he initially doubted his own ears. He stopped, tilting his head slightly. There it was again, a cry, weak, distant, but unmistakably human. Ignore it, he told himself. After all, it wasn't his problem. New York was full of personal tragedies, and Michael Thompson wasn't the type to get involved in any of them. He kept walking faster now. The crying grew clearer, coming from an alley between two commercial buildings. Michael sped up, determined to walk right past. 3 steps later, he stopped. Something about that cry, fragile, desperate, abandoned, reached a part of Michael he didn't even know still existed. A long-buried memory of a 4-year-old boy, crying alone in a cold orphanage room. "Damn it," he muttered, pivoting on his heels. Entering the dark alley, Michael turned on his phone's flashlight. The beam revealed the typical scene of an urban alley. Trash cans, broken bottles, soggy newspapers, nothing out of the ordinary. But the crying continued. He moved forward, the sound guiding him toward a pile of discarded boxes. Carefully, he moved them aside, the phone's light illuminating what lay behind. Shock hit him like a punch. A baby, wrapped in dirty blankets, left among cardboard boxes like garbage. For several seconds, Michael just stared at the child and unable to process what he was seeing. The baby, sensing his presence, opened its eyes and looked directly at him, momentarily stopping its crying. That gaze pierced something inside Michael. Quickly, he looked around, searching for any sign of who might have left the child there. The alley was empty. The only sounds were distant traffic and the soft whimper of the baby. "What kind of person—" he began but couldn't finish the thought. Anger rose within him, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. He picked up his phone again, ready to dial 911. It was the logical procedure. Social services would come, take the child, and Michael could continue his life as if nothing had happened. His finger hovered over the call button. The baby cried again, a sound so small and desperate that it echoed in Michael's chest like thunder. Images of his own childhood flooded his mind. The cold institutions, distant caregivers, the crushing loneliness of being nobody to anyone. Before he could rationalize his actions, Michael put the phone away. He leaned down and carefully picked up the tiny bundle. The baby was surprisingly light, warm against the night's chill. "It's okay," he murmured, the words sounding strange in his mouth. "I'm not leaving you here." With the baby secure in his arms, Michael left the alley, walking quickly to the main avenue. He hailed a cab which stopped immediately. "Where to, sir?" asked the driver, eyeing him curiously in the rearview mirror. Michael hesitated only for a second. "Thompson Mansion, Upper East Side," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. During the ride, the baby calmed down, falling asleep against Michael's chest. Looking at the little face, one question echoed in his mind. What was he doing? He knew nothing about babies. His house wasn't prepared for a child. His life had no space for responsibilities like this, and yet something deep inside him knew he could not hand this child over to the same system that had failed him so many years ago. When the taxi stopped in front of the imposing mansion, Michael paid the driver generously and quickly climbed the entrance steps. His decision was already made, though he couldn't rationally explain why. Mrs. Parker, his longtime housekeeper, answered the door and froze upon seeing the bundle in her employer's arms. "Mr. Thompson, is that a baby?" he answered simply, entering the house. "Found her abandoned in an alley." "My God," Mrs. Parker exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hands. "Did you call the police?" Michael looked at the sleeping baby, then back at his housekeeper. "No, not yet." And at that moment, Michael Thompson, the billionaire who had never made an impulsive decision in his adult life, who calculated each move with mathematical precision, who avoided emotional connections like a disease, did something completely out of character. He made a decision based purely on instinct. "We'll need a few things for the night. Tomorrow we'll decide what to do." What Michael didn't know as he climbed the stairs with the tiny bundle in his arms was that the cry in the night, that chance encounter in a dark alley, had just completely altered the course of his meticulously planned life. Forever. The Thompson mansion, usually a monument to order and silence, turned into a hub of frantic activity. Mrs. Parker, recovered from the initial shock, took charge with an efficiency that surprised even Michael. "We need special baby formula, diapers, clean clothes," she listed far while carefully examining the child. "And we must check that everything's okay with the little one." "Is it a boy?" asked Michael, realizing he hadn't even checked this basic detail. The housekeeper gently pulled the blanket aside. "A girl," she corrected with a kind smile. "And she seems to be doing all right, given the circumstances." Michael looked at the small creature in his arms, feeling completely out of his element. In business meetings, he was ruthless, decisive. Faced with this tiny human, he was utterly lost. "I'll make some calls," he said, handing the baby to Mrs. Parker. "People in my position must have some sort of privileged access to social services, right?" Mrs. Parker cradled the baby with a naturalness that came from experience. "Perhaps, sir, but it's past midnight, and this little one needs care now." Michael nodded, picking up his phone. One call to his personal assistant mobilized a team to buy everything a baby could need, with instructions for immediate delivery, no matter the hour. While they waited, Mrs. Parker improvised a diaper with a small towel and warmed some milk. "It's not ideal," she explained. "Babies this age need special formula. But it'll do for now." Michael watched, fascinated, as she fed the little one with a spoon patiently. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. "I raised 3 children, Mr. Thompson, and helped raise 5 grandchildren." Michael felt a pang of something like envy. Family. Something he had deliberately avoided in his quest for success and control. In less than an hour, the order arrived, boxes upon boxes containing everything a baby could need. Diapers, bottles, clothes, a portable crib, toys, specialized formula, the power of money in action. Mrs. Parker promptly turned one of the guest rooms into an improvised nursery. While she prepared the appropriate bottle, Michael found himself alone with the little one, now dressed in a light pink onesie, looking at him in quiet curiosity. "Now what?" he asked her, immediately feeling ridiculous. "What do I do with you?" His fingers, which signed multi-million-dollar contracts without hesitation, trembled slightly as he touched the baby's cheek. She responded by grasping his finger with surprising strength. Something inside Michael collapsed, a wall he hadn't known he'd built. Mrs. Parker returned with the freshly prepared bottle. "Would you like to feed her, sir?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. He sat in the armchair while the housekeeper showed him how to hold the baby properly, how to position the bottle. "Not so tilted. That's it. Perfect." The little one drank eagerly, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. It was as if she were studying him, assessing him. "What do you think is going to happen to her?" Mrs. Parker asked gently. Michael didn't answer immediately. The logical response danced in his mind. Tomorrow, he would call the authorities. He would explain how he found the baby. Perhaps he'd make a generous donation to ensure she received proper care. Then he would return to his perfectly organized life. But as he watched the tiny face, memories he had buried long ago resurfaced. The orphanage, the feeling of being just a number, the endless parade of potential adoptive parents who always chose another child. The cold no blanket could warm. "I don't know," he finally answered, surprised by his own honesty. After feeding, Mrs. Parker taught him how to hold the baby against his shoulder to burp her. The little one let out a surprisingly loud sound for her size, making Michael smile involuntarily. "She's got strong lungs," he commented. "A good sign," replied the housekeeper. "Do you want me to set up an improvised bed in my room for her tonight?" Michael hesitated again. "No, you can put the portable crib in my room. I'll keep an eye on her." Mrs. Parker couldn't hide her surprise completely, but she merely nodded. "As you wish, sir." While she organized the crib, Michael was left alone with the baby again, who was starting to doze off in his arms. He looked at the small face, now clean and peaceful, and felt something he hadn't experienced since he couldn't remember when. Peace. It was almost 3 in the morning by the time he got ready for bed. The baby was already sleeping soundly in the crib next to his bed. Michael lay down, but sleep didn't come. His mind was occupied with practical and philosophical questions. What should he do? What was the right thing? What would happen if he called the authorities? Would the child go to a loving family, or end up lost in the system like he had been? He picked up his phone, ready to call Edward Wand, his lawyer. He needed to know the legal implications of his actions. He had removed an abandoned child from the place where he found her. Technically, that could be considered. He couldn't finish the thought. He put the phone aside. He turned toward the sleeping baby. She was so small, so vulnerable. In the space of a few hours, she had become his responsibility. The moment he decided not to leave her in that alley, he had made a commitment. But for how long? Michael Thompson, the man who planned corporate acquisitions years in advance, could not envision what would happen the next day. For the first time in decades, he was navigating without a map. And strangely, it didn't terrify him as much as it should have. In the morning, he decided, tomorrow he would think clearly. Tomorrow he would make rational decisions. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Michael realized he was mentally calling the baby the little one. It wasn't a name, just a temporary label, nothing to form attachments. But deep down, he knew it was already too late. Something had changed within him in the darkness of that alley. A door that had been locked for decades was now open, and apparently, one small, unexpected visitor had come to stay. Michael awoke with a start to a sound that had never before echoed in his mansion, the shrill cry of a baby. For a moment, he was disoriented, until the reality of the previous night hit him like a wave. The baby, the alley, his impulsive decision. He looked at the clock, 5:43 a.m. Under normal circumstances, he would have exactly 17 minutes before his alarm rang to start his meticulously timed routine, but nothing was normal now. He got up and approached the makeshift crib. The little one was flailing her arms, her face red from crying so hard. "What is it?" he asked uselessly, as if the baby could answer. The bedroom door opened, and Mrs. Parker entered, already fully dressed and alert, as if she had been waiting for the crying. "She's probably hungry, Mr. Thompson," she explained, reaching out to take the baby. "I'll prepare the bottle." "I'll do it," said Michael, surprising both himself and the housekeeper. "Or rather, show me how." In the kitchen, under Mrs. Parker's patient guidance, Michael learned how to mix the formula at the correct temperature. A man who commanded thousands of employees was now focusing all his attention on measuring the white powder properly and testing it on his wrist. Sitting in the living room with the baby in his arms and the bottle in hand, Michael noticed his phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, emails, meeting notifications. The empire he had built didn't pause because he had found an abandoned child. "Could you hold her for a moment?" he asked Mrs. Parker, handing over the baby after the feeding. I need to make a few calls. In his office, the gravity of his situation became clear. He had 3 important meetings that day, including the finalization of an acquisition he had worked on for months. He couldn't just vanish, but the thought of handing over the baby to the authorities bothered him deeply. He needed time. Time to think. Time to decide what was best for the child. "Jennifer," he said to his assistant on the phone, "reschedule my agenda. I'll be working from home today." "Sir?" The surprise in her voice was evident. In 5 years, Michael had never worked from home. "It's a personal emergency," he explained briefly, "and schedule an appointment with the best pediatrician in the city for today, if possible." When he returned to the living room, Mrs. Parker was changing the baby's improvised diaper on the sofa, using a towel. "We need a proper place for that," Michael observed, watching the process with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "And a name," added the housekeeper, smiling at the little one. "We can't keep calling her the baby or the little one forever." Michael hesitated. A name would mean permanence, commitment. "Not yet," he replied. "First, we need to know more about her. Her health, her exact age." A few hours later, they were at Dr. Reynolds's office, a renowned pediatrician who responded to the emergency call of one of the richest men in the city. The doctor thoroughly examined the baby, checking reflexes, growth, and vital signs. "Based on her development, I'd say she's about 5 months old," he concluded. "She's a bit underweight, but nothing alarming. Overall, she's surprisingly healthy." Michael felt an inexplicable sense of relief. "So she's fine?" "Physically, yes," the doctor replied, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Thompson, I understand the situation is unusual. May I ask how this child ended up in your care?" Michael gave a brief explanation of finding her in the alley, omitting the fact he had not notified any authorities. The doctor nodded, his expression hard to read. "In such cases, there is a protocol to follow," he said carefully. "The authorities should be notified immediately." "I'm aware," Michael replied. "My lawyer is taking care of it." It wasn't exactly a lie. He had a meeting scheduled with Edward that afternoon, precisely to discuss the legal situation. Back at the mansion, Michael tried to balance his work with caring for the baby. He set up a baby monitor in his office to hear if she cried during her nap. Between contract reviews, he answered emails while holding the little one in his lap. During a teleconference, he kept his microphone on mute while gently rocking the baby when she started getting restless. It was an exhausting and inefficient juggling act. When Edward Morris arrived for the meeting, he found a Michael Thompson who barely resembled the impeccable, unflappable executive he had known for years. His client's tie was loose, sleeves rolled up, and a suspicious milk stain adorned his shoulder. "I see the rumors are true," said Edward, looking at the baby asleep in a makeshift playpen in the corner of the office. Michael explained the situation in detail, omitting nothing. "What are my options?" he finally asked. Edward sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Legally, you should have notified the police immediately. By not doing so, you've complicated the situation. But now we have a few options. We can notify the authorities and explain the situation. There will be questions about the delay, but given your position and intentions, we can handle it. And the baby." She would go to a temporary shelter while they search for relatives. Michael felt a tightness in his chest. "And if they don't find anyone?" "Foster care," Edward replied simply. A long silence followed, broken only by the soft breathing of the sleeping baby. "What if I wanted—" Michael hesitated, the question sounding absurd even to himself. "What if I wanted to apply as a temporary guardian?" Edward's eyes widened, clearly taken aback. "Michael, it's not like adopting a puppy. It's a huge responsibility." "I'm aware. And your life isn't structured for—" "I can restructure it," Michael interrupted, with the same determination he used to close impossible business deals. Edward studied his client and friend for a long moment. "I can start the process if that's truly what you want, but it'll be complicated. You'll have to explain why you didn't contact the authorities immediately, and there will be investigations into your suitability as a guardian. Do whatever it takes," Michael replied, looking over at the small, sleeping form. "I want to give her a better chance than I had." When Edward left, Michael sat down next to the playpen watching the baby sleep. He had barely known her for 24 hours, yet he was contemplating turning his life upside down for her. It was irrational, impulsive, completely out of character, and yet he felt strangely at peace with the decision. His phone rang, displaying Albert's name, his vice president. "Michael, we need you at the investors' meeting tomorrow." There's no way to reschedule again. Reality hit him. How could he juggle all this? The company, the baby, the legal investigations. "I'll be there," he promised, hanging up shortly after. He looked again at the little one and then at Mrs. Parker, who had quietly entered the room. "We need help," he finally admitted. "More than just yours, although you've been wonderful." "A nanny," suggested the housekeeper. "Yes," Michael agreed. "Someone experienced, trustworthy, available immediately." As Mrs. Parker left to make some calls, Michael realized he was at the beginning of a journey for which he had no map. Each step would be uncharted territory, but as he watched the baby open her eyes and smile when she saw him, he knew there was no turning back. As irrational as it seemed, that little creature abandoned in a dark alley had found a direct path to a heart Michael hadn't even realized he still had. 3 days had passed since Michael found the baby. 3 days of constant adaptations, sleepless nights, and a complete upheaval of his meticulously planned routine. His mansion, once a monument to order and minimalism, now looked like a battlefield filled with bottles, diapers, and colorful toys. Mrs. Parker had proven an invaluable support, but even she needed rest. The search for a qualified nanny was turning out to be more difficult than closing multi-million-dollar deals. The 3 candidates sent by the specialized agency simply didn't seem suitable. One was overly strict, another seemed uncomfortable upon learning of the unusual situation, and the third seemed more interested in the salary than in the child. "We need someone special," Michael told Mrs. Parker as he tried to answer emails with the baby asleep in his lap. "Someone who understands the unique circumstances." That afternoon, Michael was on a crucial video conference when the doorbell rang. He glanced at the security camera as Mrs. Parker opened the door. A young woman stood at the entrance, brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, modest but neat clothes, a slightly tense posture. Michael continued his meeting, losing interest in the unknown visitor. Probably another candidate from the agency, he thought. Almost an hour later, when he finally ended the call, Mrs. Parker knocked softly on the office door. "Mr. Thompson, there's a young woman named Emma who would like to speak with you," she announced, her tone suggesting something unusual. "She isn't from any agency. She just showed up on her own, asking if we needed help with cleaning or childcare." Michael frowned. How did she know about the baby? She didn't, apparently. She said she's been going door to door looking for a job. The situation was peculiar. Michael Thompson was not the type of man who interviewed candidates without extensive background checks, much less someone who showed up unannounced. "Politely send her away," he instructed. "We have agencies working on this. Mrs. Parker hesitated, which was rare for her always efficient demeanor. "Normally I would agree, sir, but there's something different about this girl. She has a way with children. The little one was fussy, and when Emma picked her up, well, you should see for yourself." Intrigued, Michael followed the housekeeper to the living room. There he found the young woman sitting on the couch, cradling the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. There was a naturalness in the way she held her, a confidence none of the previous candidates had displayed. The young woman rose carefully upon seeing him. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice soft but not shy. "I'm sorry for showing up without warning. I'm Emma." "Emma Clark." Michael studied her for a moment. There was something in her eyes, a mix of determination and something else he couldn't identify. "Mrs. Parker told me you're looking for a job," he said. "Yes, sir. I'll do any kind of work. Cleaning, cooking." Her eyes briefly flicked to the baby in her arms. "And I have experience with children." "How exactly did you end up at my door, Ms. Clark?" "I've been visiting houses in this neighborhood for days. I lost my job 2 months ago. My rent is due this week and..." She paused, as if afraid to reveal too much. The baby stirred in her arms, and with an automatic movement, Emma adjusted her position and murmured something softly, soothing her immediately. "It seems you two get along," Michael observed, noticing how the little one nestled comfortably against Emma. "Children can sense when someone genuinely cares," Emma replied, a slight smile lighting up her face as she looked at the baby. Michael exchanged looks with Mrs. Parker, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Why don't we talk a bit more?" he suggested, indicating a chair. Over the next half hour, Michael conducted what could be described as an impromptu interview. Emma answered his questions with straightforward honesty, though she seemed cautious when talking about her past. She had worked at a daycare, then at a diner. She claimed to have references, though she hadn't brought them. "I wasn't expecting an interview today," she explained. "I was just hopeful." The conversation was interrupted when the baby woke up and began to fuss. Before Michael or Mrs. Parker could intervene, Emma gently adjusted the little one in her arms. "I think she's hungry," Emma commented, as if she could interpret every nuance of the baby's cries. "And maybe she needs a diaper change." "How do you know?" asked Michael, surprised by her certainty. Emma smiled. "Experience. Each baby has a different cry for different needs. This one," she looked affectionately at the child, "has a slight hiccup when she's hungry." Michael watched, astonished, as Emma cared for the baby with calm efficiency, accepting the bottle Mrs. Parker prepared and feeding her as if they'd done it together 100 times. "Is she adopted?" Emma asked casually, her eyes on the baby. "It's complicated," Michael replied. "I found her recently. We're working on the legal side of things." Emma looked up quickly, something indescribable flashing across her face before her expression returned to its earlier serenity. "I see. She's very lucky." A moment of comfortable silence followed as the baby finished her bottle. Michael noticed something almost hypnotic in watching Emma with the child, a sense of peace that sharply contrasted with the chaos of the past few days. "Is the position live-in?" Emma finally asked, breaking the silence. "That would be ideal," Michael replied. "The room next to the babies is set up for a nanny. Days off are negotiable, but I'd need someone mainly available during the week when I'm at the office." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I don't have many belongings. I could start immediately." Michael hesitated. The sensible decision would be to check her references first, do a background investigation, follow the proper process. But there was urgency in the situation. He had to get back to the office. Mrs. Parker needed help, and the baby responded exceptionally well to Emma. "Consider this a probation period," he finally decided. "1 week to start. Mrs. Parker will show you the room and explain the routine." Emma's smile lit up her whole face. "Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. I promise you won't regret it." While Mrs. Parker took Emma to see the house, Michael returned to his office, reflecting on the strange chain of events redefining his life. First, the abandoned baby, now this mysterious young woman appearing at his door exactly when he needed help. Coincidences happen, of course, but in Michael Thompson's experience, they were rarely this convenient. He decided he would discreetly ask Edward to investigate Emma Clark's background. Nothing invasive, just a routine check. After all, he was entrusting her not only with his home, but also with the tiny creature who, surprisingly, had become the most important thing in his life. What Michael did not know as he typed a message to his lawyer was that Emma Clark had her own secrets, and those secrets were much closer to him than he could possibly imagine. Days turned into weeks, and a surprisingly harmonious routine took shape in the Thompson mansion. Emma had integrated so easily, it impressed everyone. It was as if she had always been there, as if she knew every corner of the house and each of the baby's needs. Michael readjusted his professional life. He started his day earlier, spent some time with the baby before heading to the office, and returned in time to see her before bedtime. Meetings that once stretched late into the night now had strict end times. The billionaire who never checked the clock during negotiations now frequently glanced at the time, eager to get back home. "You seem different," Albert commented during a board meeting. "More human." Michael merely shrugged, but secretly he knew it was true. He felt different. Every smile from the little one, Every tiny achievement, holding her own bottle, sitting up unaided, sparked a pride no corporate acquisition had ever given him. At home, he watched with fascination as Emma took care of the baby with a blend of professional expertise and genuine affection. There were moments when the young nanny looked at the child with such intensity that Michael wondered what was going through her mind. One evening, arriving home earlier than usual, he found them in the living room. Emma was sitting on the rug, shaking a colorful rattle while the baby, lying on her tummy, tried to reach it. "That's it, sweet girl," Emma encouraged. "Almost there." Michael hovered in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt the moment. There was something almost magical in the interaction between the two, a bond that went beyond a typical nanny-child relationship. The little one finally managed to scoot forward a bit and grab the rattle, shaking it triumphantly. Emma clapped enthusiastically. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, finally noticing Michael's presence. "She's starting to crawl." Michael stepped into the room, kneeling on the rug beside them. "Really?" he asked, looking at the baby, who now happily chewed on the rattle. "Yes, it's a big developmental milestone," Emma explained, her eyes shining with pride. "Soon she'll be crawling all over the house. We'll have to child-proof the outlets," Michael noted automatically. Emma looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret, surprise mixed with approval. "I've already installed outlet covers," she said, "and put up baby gates at the stairs. Hope you don't mind." Michael realized Emma was not just caring for the baby, but anticipating her future needs. It was a level of commitment that went beyond professional duty. Over dinner, with the baby asleep, Michael decided to learn more about the young woman who had turned the initial chaos into a manageable routine. "How did you learn so much about babies, Emma?" She seemed momentarily uncomfortable, toying with the food on her plate. "I worked at a daycare for a while, and I've always been good with children." "You have a natural ability," Michael observed. "The little one clearly adores you." Emma smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes. "She's special. She deserves all the love in the world." A moment of silence passed, and then Michael approached a subject he had been putting off. "Edward, my lawyer, has initiated proceedings for me to get temporary legal custody, while we search for any relatives. Of course." Emma's hand froze for an instant, her fork halfway to her mouth. "And if they find relatives," she asked, her voice almost a whisper, "then we'll have to evaluate what's best for her," Michael answered cautiously, watching Emma's reaction. "Of course," she agreed quickly, lowering her eyes. "That's the right thing to do." Michael couldn't decipher the expression on Emma's face. Was it sadness? Concern? There was something more in her reaction than professional worry. He remembered Edward hadn't yet returned with the background check he'd requested. He needed to follow up. After dinner, as had become customary, Michael spent some time with the little one in her room. Emma had just fed her, and now the baby was alert, her large eyes fixed on the colorful mobile hanging above the crib. "I think she's trying to figure out how it works," Emma said from the doorway, smiling. "She'll be a scientist," Michael joked, gently swaying the mobile. "Or an engineer. Or an artist, fascinated by the colors," Emma added, moving closer to stand beside him. For a moment, the three of them stood there, as if they were a family. The thought hit Michael with surprising force. He hadn't planned this. It wasn't part of any life strategy. Yet somehow, in a very short time, his world had been reorganized around this tiny human and the woman who helped care for her. The baby yawned, her eyes beginning to close. "Time for bed, little one," Emma murmured, adjusting the blanket around her. "You know," Michael said as they turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp with colored hues glowing, "we need to give her a name. We can't keep calling her the little one forever." Emma hesitated, biting her lip. "You should choose," she said. "You're the one who's—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm taking responsibility for her." There was something in the way Emma spoke that stirred Michael's curiosity, a contained emotion, an intensity that seemed out of place for a simple suggestion about names. Later, in his office, Michael finally received a message from Edward about Emma. Preliminary checks revealed nothing alarming. Emma Clark had indeed worked at the daycare she'd mentioned, though for less time than she'd stated. Her earlier records were sparse, with some undocumented periods. Nothing criminal, just gaps. Michael felt both relieved and intrigued. Emma was clearly good at her job. The little one was thriving under her care, but there was something in her story that didn't fully add up. Walking past the baby's room before bed, Michael heard Emma's soft voice singing a lullaby. He paused to listen, not wanting to interrupt. There was a raw emotion in her voice, something deeply personal that made him feel almost like an intruder. When the song ended, he stepped away quietly. Whatever mystery surrounded Emma Clark, one thing was certain. She loved that child. And for now, that was enough. As he got ready for bed, Michael reflected on how much his life had changed in such a short time. The man who lived only for work now found himself thinking about baby names, weekend plans, and small moments of shared joy. And for the first time in many years, the silent, immaculate mansion that had always been just a place to sleep began to feel like a home. A month had passed since Emma arrived at the Thompson mansion. Spring was beginning to emerge in the well-tended gardens, bringing flowers and a milder climate. The little one was noticeably growing each week, her round face more expressive, her movements more coordinated. Michael had finally found a balance between his professional and personal life. Although Albert and other company executives expressed concern over his punctual departures and occasional remote work, the financial results remained impeccable. The Thompson empire continued to thrive, even with its founder splitting his attention. But not everything was perfectly calm in Michael's mind. One morning, getting up earlier than usual for breakfast, Michael heard Emma's voice coming from the living room. She spoke softly, likely assuming she was alone with the baby. He approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt. "You're getting so big," Emma was saying, her voice filled with emotion. "So beautiful. Exactly how I imagined you would be." There was something in the intimacy of those words that made Michael pause. It wasn't just the usual affection of a dedicated nanny. It was deeper, more personal, as if there were a bond that existed before their time together. When he finally entered the room, Emma quickly changed her expression, adopting her usual professional demeanor. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she greeted him, adjusting the baby in her arms. "You're up early today." "I have an important meeting," he replied, watching her more closely than usual. "Are you two all right?" "Perfectly fine," Emma smiled, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match her casual tone, a glint of guilt, anxiety. In the following days, Michael began to notice other peculiar behaviors. How Emma always avoided talking about her past, changing the subject when asked about her family or childhood. How she grew tense when visitors arrived at the mansion, as if hiding with the baby in another room. One afternoon, while working in his home office, Michael glanced out the window to see Emma walking through the garden with the little one. When she thought she was alone, the young woman held the baby differently, more intimately, more possessively. At one point, he saw her take something out of her pocket, look at it briefly, then put it away, wiping what looked like tears. Over dinner, Michael tried again to learn more about the nanny's past. "You mentioned growing up in the countryside. Which town exactly?" Emma hesitated, her hand pausing momentarily over her glass of water. "A small town." "You've probably never heard of it," she replied vaguely. "There's nothing interesting about it, believe me." "Do you still have family there?" "No," she answered quickly, maybe too quickly. "I'd rather not talk about it if you don't mind." Michael respected her wish, but her constant evasiveness only increased his suspicions. What secrets was Emma hiding that made her so reluctant to share even the most basic details of her life? The strangest behavior occurred when the baby, sitting in her high chair while Emma prepared her mashed food, made a clear, distinct sound. "Mama!" Time seemed to freeze. Emma dropped the spoon she was holding, her face visibly paling. She said... Emma stammered, turning to the little one with a look of shock mingled with something Michael could only describe as recognition. "Mama," the baby repeated happily, patting her hands on the high chair tray. "Mama." Michael watched Emma's reaction carefully. She looked like she was struggling to maintain her composure. "It's normal," she finally said, her voice trembling. Babies babble mama and dada without really understanding the meaning. Sure, Michael agreed, but the seed of suspicion had already been planted. The intensity of the bond between Emma and the baby became more evident each day. The little one responded to Emma's voice and touch in an almost instinctive way, settling immediately in her arms when fussy, smiling at the first sound of her voice as she entered the room. It was a connection that went beyond a typical nanny-child relationship. There was something almost primal about it, something Michael couldn't explain, and it was starting to unsettle him. One evening, the baby refused to sleep, crying insistently. "Let me try," Michael said, extending his arms to take her from Emma. "She has colic," Emma explained, reluctant to hand over the little one. "I know exactly how to calm her." "I want to learn as well," Michael insisted. "After all, I'm the one who's planning to adopt her." A shadow crossed Emma's face, and for a moment Michael thought she would refuse outright. Finally, she handed over the baby, but remained close, watching nervously and correcting every small move Michael made. "You're not supporting her head properly," she criticized. "And she prefers being rocked like this, not like that." The tension between them mounted, something they hadn't experienced before in their generally harmonious relationship. "Emma," Michael finally said, his voice calm but firm. "I know you care about her, but remember, I'm the one with the legal responsibility here." "I'm sorry," Emma mumbled, stepping back. "I just want what's best for her." Michael then realized something disconcerting. Emma knew things about the baby he had never mentioned, like her peculiar preference for a specific lullaby, how she calmed down when holding a blanket in a certain way, how she disliked the taste of a particular baby food, details Michael only discovered through trial and error, but which Emma seemed to know instinctively. It was as if she had known the baby before coming to work at the mansion. That night, after Emma retired, Michael sat in his office pondering everything he had observed, the constant evasions about her past, the almost maternal connection to the baby, the intense emotional reactions to moments that should be routine for a professional nanny. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Edward and his lawyer. "I need you to investigate Emma Clark. Full background, urgent and discreet." As he hit send, Michael felt a twinge of guilt. Emma had been nothing short of perfect in caring for the little one. The baby was thriving under her attention. Perhaps he was overreacting, seeing mysteries where there were only dedication and compassion. But his intuition, the same that had guided him through countless high-stakes negotiations, told him there was more to Emma's story than she let on. And when it came to the safety and future of the child who had inadvertently become the center of his world, Michael Thompson wasn't about to ignore even the slightest hunch. Michael surveyed the serious faces around the meeting table. The board members eyed him with a mix of concern and disapproval, something he was not used to. Albert, his vice president and longtime friend, spoke up. "Michael, we're concerned about your level of engagement lately," he said, choosing his words carefully. "You've cancelled 3 important meetings in the last month, you've been leaving earlier than usual, and the Tech Solutions acquisition is practically stalled." "The company's numbers are still excellent," Michael replied calmly. For now, Eleanor Reed, one of the senior board members, interjected. "But Thompson Enterprises didn't get where it is with part-time leadership. Your personal life seems to be affecting the commitment to the very company you built." Michael felt a wave of irritation. For 20 years, he had dedicated every minute of his life to the company. Now, after just a few weeks of rebalancing his priorities, they were questioning his commitment. "I'm going through a temporary personal reorganization," he explained, keeping his voice neutral. "But rest assured, my commitment to this company remains unwavering." "It's about the child, isn't it?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "Are the rumors that you're trying to adopt a baby true?" Michael hesitated. He wasn't ready to make his situation with the little one public, especially since the legal process was still ongoing. "My personal life isn't on the agenda for this meeting," he finally answered. He left the room feeling torn. On the one hand, he understood the board's concern. On the other, he could no longer imagine a life where work took up his every thought and moment. The little one had changed something fundamental inside him. Arriving home earlier than usual, he found Emma in the living room, reading a children's book to the baby. There was a natural domesticity to the scene that made him pause at the door, observing without announcing his presence. Emma wasn't just reading the book. She was creating different voices for each character, adding dramatic pauses, pointing to the pictures with an enthusiasm that elicited giggles from the child. It was a moment of such deep connection that Michael felt almost like an intruder. "Look who's here," Emma exclaimed when she finally noticed him, her tone shifting subtly. "It's Daddy," she added, speaking to the baby. The term Daddy took Michael by surprise. It was the first time Emma had referred to him that way, and there was something both comforting and unsettling in how naturally she had assumed this familial dynamic. "I got home early," he explained, moving closer to pick up the little one, who reached out her arms to him. "How was your day?" "Wonderful," Emma said, her face lighting up as she spoke about the baby. "She's almost able to sit up on her own, and we tried a new pumpkin puree she loved." There was an almost maternal glow in Emma's eyes as she talked about these small triumphs, a mix of pride and love that went far beyond professional enthusiasm. Michael remembered the message he'd sent to the investigator and felt a stab of guilt. That night, after dinner, he received a call from David Hunter, the investigator he had hired. "I have some preliminary information about Emma Clark," the investigator said. "I can stop by your office tomorrow to discuss in person." "I'd prefer you tell me now," Michael insisted, locking the door to his home office. "Well, the situation is somewhat murky. Emma Clark has a patchy employment history. She worked at a diner for a few months, then at a daycare briefly. There are undocumented periods, several months at a time, where I can't trace her activities. Criminal record? None. Not even a traffic ticket. It's as if she's extremely careful, or..." The investigator hesitated. "Or what?" "Or as if she's deliberately keeping a low profile. There's something off in her history, Mr. Thompson, but I need more time to figure out exactly what." After hanging up, Michael brooded over the findings. Nothing conclusive, but enough to fuel his suspicions. Why would there be gaps in Emma's record? What was she doing during those times? His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp cry from the baby's room. He rushed over, finding Emma already there, picking the little one up. "She feels warm," Emma said, her voice tense with worry. Michael touched the baby's forehead. She was hot, but not alarmingly so. "Seems like a mild fever," he commented, trying to calm Emma, who seemed overly distressed. "We need to monitor her temperature. Babies can get worse quickly," Emma insisted, her eyes fixed on the little one as if she feared something terrible would happen if she looked away for even a second. The intensity of her reaction seemed disproportionate. Michael had seen mild fevers before, and the pediatrician had assured him they were common and rarely serious. "I'll get the thermometer and the fever reducer," he offered. "I already have them ready," Emma replied quickly. "I can recognize the signs. I know exactly what she needs." Michael watched as Emma administered the medicine with expert hands, murmuring soothing words to the baby. There was something almost visceral about her concern, as if the thought of the baby suffering caused her physical pain. For the next few hours, Emma refused to leave the baby's side, checking her temperature obsessively, adjusting blankets, applying cool compresses when needed. When Michael suggested she rest while he watched the baby, Emma refused with surprising vehemence. "I'm fine. I'd rather stay with her." The fever subsided around midnight, but Emma remained vigilant, her body tense like a taut violin string. Her devotion was admirable, but there was something unsettling in its intensity, something beyond professional care. The next morning, with the baby recovered and sleeping peacefully, Michael decided it was time to confront Emma. Not about his deeper suspicions yet, but about her behavior during the night. "Emma, your dedication is remarkable, but you seemed almost desperate last night." Emma avoided his gaze, her hands nervously adjusting the baby's blanket. "I'm just worried about her." "It's more than that," Michael pressed gently. "It's like you have a terrible fear that something might happen to her, a fear that feels personal." Emma's eyes filled with sudden tears, which she quickly tried to hide. "I've seen babies get really sick, really fast," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want that to happen to her, to your little one." The verbal slip did not go unnoticed by Michael. "Our little one." As if Emma had some sort of claim on the baby that went beyond her role as a nanny. "Emma, if there's something you're not telling me, something about your past that could affect your work here—" "There's nothing," she interrupted, her voice suddenly firm. "I'm just doing my job, caring for her as if she were mine." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with a meaning neither was ready to face directly. The tension was palpable, almost suffocating. Michael studied Emma's face, the fear in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, the almost imperceptible trembling of her lips. There was so much she wasn't saying, secrets buried under layers of care and devotion. Should he confront her now? Demand the whole truth? Or keep watching, gathering more information until he was sure of what was really happening? The baby began to whimper softly in the crib, breaking the moment. Emma moved automatically toward her, but Michael held up a hand. "I'll take care of her now," he said, his voice firm. "You need to rest." For a second, Michael thought Emma would protest, even refuse. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the almost physical impulse to reach the baby. Finally, she nodded stiffly and left the room, her shoulders tense as if forcing herself with every step. As he picked the little one up, Michael knew they had reached a turning point. The carefully built harmony of the past few weeks was crumbling under the weight of undisclosed secrets, and sooner or later, those secrets would come to light, no matter how hard Emma tried to hide them. The morning began with an unusual sense of urgency. Michael had to leave early for the office because his meeting with Japanese investors had been moved up. "Sorry to rush out," he told Emma as he straightened his tie. "This negotiation is crucial for our expansion into the Asian market." "Don't worry," Emma replied, gently rocking the baby who had just been fed. "We'll be fine, right, sweet girl?" Michael watched for a moment the ease with which Emma soothed the baby. Despite his growing suspicions, he couldn't deny that she was extraordinary with the little one. "I should be back late this afternoon," he said, leaning in to kiss the baby's forehead. "Call me if there's any problem." Emma nodded, and Michael noticed something in her eyes as she watched him with the baby, a mix of tenderness and sadness he couldn't fully decipher. The meeting was scheduled to start at 9, and traffic promised to be especially heavy that morning. Michael had everything planned. He would leave with enough time, stop by the office to pick up the final proposal documents, and arrive at the hotel where the investors were staying at least 15 minutes early. What he had not planned was realizing halfway to the office that he had forgotten the folder with the original contracts that needed to be signed, documents sitting on his home office desk. "Frank, we need to go back," he told the driver. "I forgot something important." The return trip was quick. Michael calculated he still had enough time as long as he didn't linger. He entered through the side door leading directly to his home office corridor, not wanting to disturb the baby's morning routine. That was when he heard it. Emma's voice from the baby's room, the door slightly ajar, allowing her words to carry clearly. "My love, my treasure," she was saying softly. "You have no idea how long I dreamed of this moment." Michael froze, his hand hovering over his office door handle. There was an intimacy to Emma's words that made him hesitate. "Mommy's back," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm never leaving you again, never again." The world seemed to stop spinning. Michael felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. "Mommy." The word echoed in his mind like thunder. Carefully, to avoid making noise, he moved closer to the baby's room door. Through the crack, he saw Emma sitting in the rocking chair, the baby nestled against her chest. Silent tears ran down the young woman's face as she cradled the little one. "It was so hard, my love," she whispered. "But we're together now, in a different way, but together." Realization hit Michael like a physical blow. Emma wasn't just a dedicated nanny. She was the mother, the baby's biological mother, the child he had found abandoned in that dark alley. He stepped back silently, his heart pounding in his chest. A storm of emotions flooded him, initial shock giving way to a wave of anger so intense he had to brace against the wall to keep from staggering. She had lied, planned everything, gotten into his house, close to the child she'd abandoned. Why? For what purpose? Images from the past months flooded his mind, now seen through a completely different lens, Emma showing up by chance at his door, looking for a job, her immediate knowledge of the baby's needs, not intuition or experience, but because she was the mother, her emotional reaction when the little one called her mama, her excessive worry during the fever, not just professional concern, but maternal guilt, how she always avoided questions about her past, and most of all, that look, the indescribable look she gave the baby when she thought nobody was watching. It all made sense now, a terrible and disturbing sense. Michael composed himself enough to quietly grab the folder from his office and leave unnoticed. In the car, he instructed Frank to continue to the meeting, though his mind was a million miles away from business or contracts. "Everything all right, Mr. Thompson?" the driver asked, noticing his pale complexion. "Yes, Frank. Just focusing on the meeting." Somehow, Michael survived the next 4 hours. He presented figures, discussed clauses, negotiated terms. His professional autopilot kicked in, while inside he processed the devastating revelation. When it finally ended, he politely declined the investor's lunch invitation, citing other commitments. He needed to think. He needed to decide what to do. Instead of heading home, he asked Frank to take him to Central Park. He walked for hours among the trees and lakes, his phone turned off, his mind in turmoil with conflicting thoughts and emotions. How should he proceed? Confront Emma immediately, call the police. She had abandoned a child, a crime. But she was also the biological mother, which legally complicated his own position. As the afternoon wore on, his initial anger gave way to more complex questions. Why would a mother abandon her baby, only to then look for a job in the house of the person who found her? If she wanted the child back, why not simply take her when they were alone? What circumstances would drive a woman to such a desperate act? He recalled Emma's evident devotion, how she took genuine care of the baby. It didn't seem like the behavior of someone who would abandon her child without reason. When the sun began to set, Michael sat on a bench, physically and emotionally exhausted. All the certainties he had built in the last few weeks, about the baby, about Emma, about the future he imagined, were now on shifting sand. But one thing was clear. He could no longer continue living under the same roof with Emma, sharing care of the baby without knowing the entire truth. Whatever the story behind her actions, he needed to hear it. Michael turned his phone on to find dozens of messages and missed calls. The most recent was from Emma, worried about his late return. The concern sounded genuine, which only made everything more confusing. "Frank," he said, returning to the car that waited at a short distance, "take me home." During the ride, he made his decision. He would confront Emma tonight, after the baby was asleep. He would demand the complete truth, no half answers or evasions. And depending on what he heard, he would decide the next steps. One thing was certain: the life he had begun to build, the little improvised family they formed, would never be the same after tonight. When the car finally stopped at the mansion's entrance, Michael took a deep breath, preparing for the confrontation that could change everything. Michael entered the mansion to find Emma and the baby in the living room. With his newly acquired knowledge, he looked at them through completely different eyes. How had he not noticed before? The shape of the baby's eyes, the delicate contour of her chin, they were Emma's features. Subtle, but undeniably present. The resemblance was like a hidden code in plain sight, one he was only now able to decode. "You're back," Emma said, rising with the baby in her arms. "We were worried." "The meeting ran long," he replied, forcing a smile as he held out his arms for the little one. Holding the baby, he felt a surge of almost overwhelming emotion. Over the past months, this child had become the center of his world. The idea of losing her was unbearable. "How was your day?" he asked, keeping his tone casual while gently running his hand over her fine hair. "Quiet. We walked in the garden. She loved the flowers." Over dinner, Michael struggled to maintain normalcy. He talked about the meeting, asked about their day, commented on the weather. But his gaze kept returning to the baby's features, mentally comparing them to Emma's. Emma, however, seemed to sense something had changed. Her eyes sought his often, her posture more rigid than usual. "Are you all right, Michael?" she finally asked. "You seem worried." "Just tired." It's been a long day. After Emma left to bathe the baby, Michael locked himself in his office. On his computer, he researched legal rights. What rights did a man who found an abandoned child have versus those of the biological parents? The answers were not reassuring. The law generally favored blood ties. If Emma decided to claim the baby, proving she was the biological mother, her chances would be significant, unless he could prove she was unfit. Abandonment, depending on the circumstances, was not always considered sufficient proof. Later, passing by the baby's room, he saw Emma soothing the little one, who was fussy and crying. "She's a bit cranky today," Emma said, exhaustion evident on her face. "Not sure what's bothering her." "Maybe she senses something different," Michael suggested vaguely. "Babies are sensitive." "Yes, they're like little emotional sponges." Back in his room, Michael spent hours staring at the ceiling, tormented by unanswered questions. What circumstances led Emma to do this? Was there any explanation that could justify her actions? And most importantly, what was best for the little one? The ethical dilemma consumed him. If he confronted Emma, he might trigger a battle that would traumatize everyone. If he didn't, he would continue living with a lie that would grow like a chasm between them. The next morning, tired after almost no sleep, he made his decision. He needed to know the whole story before making any judgment. Finding Emma in the kitchen, he smiled as if nothing were wrong. "I was thinking," he said casually while pouring his coffee, "maybe we could talk tonight. I have some ideas about the little one's future I'd like to discuss with you." "Sure," Emma replied, evident relief in her voice, unaware that this conversation would change everything between them. The next day dawned with a tense atmosphere in the Thompson mansion. Michael had spent another sleepless night, rehearsing in his mind what he would say to Emma, how he would address the truth he'd discovered. Every scenario he imagined ended badly. During breakfast, the silence was almost palpable. The only words exchanged revolved around the baby and daily tasks, short, functional sentences masking the whirlwind of emotions beneath the surface. "She didn't eat well," Emma commented, gently wiping the baby's face. "Maybe another tooth is coming in." Michael replied, watching how Emma checked the baby's gums with the intimate familiarity of a mother, not just a nanny. 3 times that morning, Michael almost broke the facade. When Emma hummed a lullaby while changing the little one's diaper, when he saw her kiss the baby's tiny hands repeatedly with absolute adoration, when their hands brushed briefly while passing the bottle, and Emma's startled eyes met his. But each time, he retreated at the last moment. He needed the right time, the right words. Emma, for her part, seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted. She kept the baby even closer than usual, almost never letting her out of sight. When Michael offered to feed the little one lunch, Emma rushed in. "I'll do it," she said, her voice betraying a slight panic. She's a bit fussy today. Better keep the routine." Around noon, while they were playing with the baby in the living room, the incident they both feared and anticipated finally happened. The little one, propped up on cushions on the rug, looked directly at Emma and babbled distinctly. "Mama! Mama!" Time seemed to freeze. Emma's face went pale, her eyes meeting Michael's in a moment of pure terror. Michael felt his heart race, the word hovering between them like a confession. "She's getting good at that," he finally said, his voice deliberately neutral. Emma tried to smile, but it was more of a grimace of tension. "It's normal at this age. They repeat sounds." Her voice failed. That afternoon, while Emma was giving the baby a bath, a small accident occurred. The little one slipped slightly in the tub, only causing a momentary scare before Emma held her tightly. But Emma's reaction was disproportionate. A scream of pure terror followed by uncontrollable tears as she clung to the baby. "It's okay," Michael assured her from the bathroom door. "She just slipped a bit." I know, Emma replied, her voice trembling. "It's just that I couldn't bear it if she got hurt, not again. Not when finally—" She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had almost revealed. Michael pretended not to notice the slip, but his heart was pounding. Over dinner, silence returned. Michael watched Emma push her food around, barely eating, her eyes constantly drifting to the baby in the high chair. He himself could hardly swallow, his throat tight with unspoken words. Why had she abandoned the child only to reappear this way? What motivated her? And most importantly, what was best for the little one? His heart told him to fight with all his might to keep the baby. His conscience questioned whether that would be fair. To the child, to Emma, even to himself. By the time evening came, the emotional exhaustion was visible in both of them. Emma looked like she had aged years in a single day. Dark circles under her pale face. Michael felt equally drained, every nerve in his body taut like a string about to snap. The baby finally fell asleep after a long crying session, as if she too was exhausted by the tension in the house. Downstairs, Michael found Emma sitting alone in the dark living room, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating her face. It was time. He could not postpone it any longer. "Emma," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "we need to talk about the truth." She lifted her eyes to him, and Michael saw not surprise but resignation, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. "Yes," she simply replied, "I think we do." The silence in the living room felt alive, almost tangible, each second stretching like a string about to break. Michael looked away from the window and faced Emma, his expression a mask of forced calm. "I know you're her mother," he finally said, the words falling between them like stones in still water. "I heard you call yourself Mommy when you thought no one was listening." Emma showed no surprise. Instead, her body seemed to collapse, as though a weight she had carried for a long time had finally become unbearable. Tears began rolling silently down her cheeks. How?" she began, her voice barely audible. "Yesterday morning. I came back to get a folder and heard you in her room." Emma covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. When she finally looked at Michael, her face was etched with a pain so visceral, he felt it like a physical blow. "Yes," she admitted, her voice broken. "I'm her mother. Her real name is Sophia." Michael felt the impact of the name like a revelation. Sophia. The little one had a name that had never been spoken in this house, an identity kept secret. "Why?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "Why abandon her in an alley only to show up at my door?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to control her sobs. "I never wanted to leave her," she began, her voice trembling. "You can't imagine how it destroyed me to leave my daughter in that alley. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "Then why did you do it?" Michael insisted, fighting the anger threatening to consume his compassion. "I lost everything," she said, her words interspersed with sobs. "My job at the diner closed suddenly. I couldn't pay rent, I had nowhere to go. The father's family disappeared when they found out I was pregnant, and my parents disowned me when I decided to keep the baby on my own." Michael stayed silent, letting her continue. "I tried shelters, social services, everything. But with a newborn, no fixed address. No one would hire a homeless mother with a baby. Then I got postpartum depression, so severe there were days I couldn't even get up. I didn't eat, didn't sleep." She paused, voice quavering. "I couldn't properly care for her." Michael tried to picture Emma, always so competent and caring, in that desperate state. "When the money ran out completely, when I had no more formula because I myself hadn't eaten for days," Emma closed her eyes as though the memory was too painful, "I realized I was slowly killing my daughter with my own misery." Tears now flowed freely down her face. "That night I was broken, physically and emotionally. Sophia was crying from hunger, and I had nothing to give her, nothing. I thought she'd have a better chance without me, that someone would find her, someone who could give her what I couldn't." Emma's voice became barely audible. "I wrapped her in the best blankets I had. I kissed her little face one last time. And then I left her in that alley, near a busy restaurant, praying someone would find her quickly." Michael felt a lump in his throat. He remembered the night he had found the little one, now Sophia, and how her crying had pierced something within him. "What happened then?" he asked, his voice gentler. "I hid across the street. I couldn't leave, couldn't walk away. I waited until I saw someone approach. I saw you find her." Emma looked directly at Michael. "I saw you hesitate, how you looked at her, How you picked her up so carefully. Something about you felt right. So you followed me. Emma nodded slowly. I followed the taxi here, saw where you lived. In the days that followed, I mustered whatever strength I had left. Found help at a church, managed to bathe, got these clothes. Then I gathered the courage to knock on your door. All planned to stay close to her, Michael said, failing to hide the accusatory tone. Not to take her away, Emma protested, her eyes pleading for understanding. Just to see if she was okay, to be near her somehow. I thought maybe I could be your housekeeper, just to see her occasionally. Emma wiped her tears away. But then you needed a nanny, and I couldn't resist the chance to care for my own daughter, even if she didn't know who I was. Michael stood up, tension coursing through his body. He walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. The pain of being with her every day, caring for her, loving her, but not being able to say I'm her mother, Emma continued, her voice tight with emotion. It's been a daily torment, a joy mixed with constant agony. Turning around, Michael studied Emma's devastated face. He saw not just the dedicated nanny he had come to know, but also a mother who had made the most painful decision imaginable, believing it was best for her child. Please, Emma begged, standing as well, her entire body trembling. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I beg you, don't separate me from her again. I can't bear to lose her a second time. Tears now streamed down Emma's face, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She is everything to me. Everything. Michael felt torn between compassion for Emma's obvious pain and a sense of betrayal for the weeks of deception. Upstairs, little Sophia slept innocently, unaware of the drama unfolding over her future. Emma dropped to her knees, her sobs turning to silent, devastating weeping. Please, she whispered one last time. Michael remained silent, processing all he had just heard, each revelation reshaping his understanding of what had happened and what might happen next. Time seemed suspended in the Thompson mansion's living room. Michael looked at Emma, still on her knees, her body bowed under the weight of her confession. With a deep sigh, he finally spoke. Stand up, Emma. His voice was not harsh, but tired, bearing the weight of the night's revelations. Emma obeyed slowly, uncertain of what would come next, her face streaked with what seemed like endless tears. You lied to me. For weeks, Michael said, running his hand through his hair in frustration. You entered my home under false pretenses, took advantage of my trust. Emma lowered her gaze, accepting the accusation without protest. I know what I did is unforgivable, she murmured. Every day I spent here, I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was so scared of losing Sophia again, scared of what you would do. Michael sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. When Emma hesitated, he insisted, Please. This conversation is far from over, and neither of us should face it standing. As Emma perched on the edge of the sofa, Michael studied her face. He saw not only fear and guilt, but also undeniable love for Sophia in every expression, every gesture. It was the same love he himself had begun to feel for the little one. As much as I want to condemn your actions, I can't ignore the circumstances that led you to them, he finally said. And I can't deny what I've seen over the past few months, your genuine care, your unconditional love for Sophia. The baby's name still felt strange on his lips, yet somehow right, the name she should have had from the start. Emma wiped away fresh tears with the back of her hand. After that night, I found help, she continued, her voice steadier now. A church program for mothers in crisis. I started therapy for the depression, got medication. I was getting better. Why didn't you seek help before abandoning her? Michael asked, the question that had haunted him. I tried, Emma replied, pain evident in her voice. I called social services, women's shelters, but there were waiting lists, forms, requirements. When you're on the streets with a hungry baby, a promise of help in 2 weeks isn't enough. Michael nodded slowly. He was well aware of how the system failed society's most vulnerable. In my desperation, I did the unthinkable, Emma continued, her voice breaking once more. And I'll live with that regret for the rest of my life, But when I saw you with her, when I saw this mansion, the security, everything you could offer, you decided that was best for her," Michael finished. "Yes," Emma answered simply. "But then working here, seeing how you came to love her too, I realized Sophia might have what I never did, not just material comfort, but real love from people who truly care." A thoughtful silence settled between them, no longer tense, but reflective. Outside, the night was calm, the moon partially illuminating the mansion's gardens. "What happens now?" Emma finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. Michael took a deep breath. This was the question that had tormented him all day, ever since he had discovered the truth. What to do? What were his legal options? Most importantly, what was best for Sophia? "It would be easy for me to call the authorities," he began, watching Emma stiffen visibly. "Report the abandonment. Use my influence and resources to fight for custody." Emma closed her eyes as if bracing for a final blow. "But who would that serve?" Michael continued, his voice softening. "Not Sophia, certainly. She'd be dragged through a traumatic legal process, possibly placed in temporary foster care. Not you, who, despite your mistakes, clearly love your daughter, and not me, because despite the hurt and betrayal, I recognize that I love that child too." Emma opened her eyes, stunned by the direction the conversation was taking. "What are you suggesting?" "Stay," Michael said simply. "Both of you. Here in the mansion." I don't understand," Emma stammered, her eyes wide with surprise. "It's both simple and complicated," Michael explained, a slight smile touching his lips for the first time that night. "Sophia deserves her biological mother in her life. You deserve a chance to be her mother openly, without secrets or guilt. And I..." He hesitated. "I found I can't imagine my life without that little one now." "Are you suggesting we raise Sophia and together?" Emma asked, disbelief evident in her voice. "Not romantically, if that's what you're thinking," Michael clarified quickly, "but as a sort of co-parenting arrangement. You'd keep living here, not as a nanny, but as Sophia's mother." "I would be..." He searched for the right word. "A guardian, a godfather, a father figure in her life." Emma seemed speechless, her hands trembling slightly. "Why would you do that? After everything I've done?" "Because in the last few months, I've learned an important lesson. Family isn't defined solely by blood or legal papers," Michael replied. "It's defined by love, commitment, by the desire to do what's best for someone, even when it's hard." Fresh tears rolled down Emma's face, though these now seemed like tears of relief, gratitude, cautious hope. "It won't be easy," Michael warned. "We'll have to set clear rules, boundaries. We'll need to consult a lawyer to formalize some agreement. And, most importantly, we'll have to learn to trust each other again for Sophia's sake." "I'd do anything," Emma said fervently. "Anything to make this work." Michael held out his hand in a gesture of agreement. "Then it's a deal. We'll try, one day at a time." Emma took his offered hand, her grip hesitant at first, then firm. "One day at a time," she repeated, a timid smile appearing through her tears. As the mansion's clock struck midnight, a new and unconventional family arrangement began to take shape. A family formed not by planning or tradition, but by extraordinary circumstances, mistakes and forgiveness, and above all, by the shared love for a tiny child who had inadvertently transformed two lonely lives. The future remained uncertain, full of potential challenges and complications. But for the first time in a long while, both Michael and Emma faced it not with fear but with cautious hope. A hope as fragile as the first bud of spring, yet with the potential to grow into something lasting and beautiful. The first few weeks after the revelation were delicate, like a dance between two partners still learning the steps. The Thompson mansion, once a monument to order and predictability, became the stage for a unique social experiment. A solitary billionaire and a single mother trying to raise a child who, in different ways, had saved them both. On a Sunday morning, Michael watched from the kitchen door as Emma prepared Sophia's breakfast. The scene was oddly domestic, Emma humming softly while mixing fruit puree, Sophia in her high chair happily tapping a plastic spoon on the tray. "Can we talk about some formalities?" he asked, finally entering the kitchen. Emma nodded, her expression turning serious. "Edward is drafting the documents," Michael continued, pouring himself some coffee. "A non-traditional shared custody agreement. Legally, I'd be the official guardian, but you'd have full rights as her mother." "That sounds fair," Emma replied, her voice cautious. "What about expenses?" "All basic needs will be covered by me. Housing, food, education, healthcare." Michael paused. "I'll also open an account for you, with a monthly salary." Emma stopped feeding Sophia, her eyes locking with Michael's. "I'm not after your money. It was never about that." "I know," he said softly, "but you're Sophia's mother. You need financial independence, not just for your sake, but for hers." After a moment of consideration, Emma nodded. "Thank you. But I want to contribute too, somehow." Michael smiled faintly. "That brings me to another point. What would you like to do? Professionally, I mean." The question caught Emma off guard. For so long, her only concern had been surviving and reclaiming her daughter. The idea of planning a future felt almost extravagant. I've always wanted to work with children. Maybe something in early childhood education." "We can explore that," Michael suggested. "The Thompson Foundation has an educational scholarship program. Whenever you're ready, of course." The look of gratitude on Emma's face was so intense that Michael felt momentarily uncomfortable. He wasn't used to seeing the direct impact of his wealth on someone's life so closely. As the days went on, they established a routine. Emma remained the primary caregiver during the day, but Michael now participated actively in key moments: breakfast before work, a family dinner, the bath and bedtime rituals. Sophia sensed the change. Her already cheerful personality seemed to bloom even more with the constant attention from the two adults in her life. Her limited vocabulary expanded quickly, adding dada to the already established mama, a development that secretly thrilled Michael, though he tried not to show it. Not everything was harmonious, though. There were moments of tension, disagreements over small things, the right bedtime, whether she should try certain foods, which toys were most suitable for her development. "She's still too young for that," Emma argued one afternoon, holding up a puzzle Michael had brought. "She could swallow the pieces." "It's an educational set, specifically designed for her age," he countered. "I read 3 different studies on cognitive development before choosing it." Emma raised an eyebrow. "And I have maternal instinct plus months of direct experience with her." The silent standoff was broken by Sophia's unexpected laughter, watching the adults' confrontation with interest, as though she understood their dilemma. Such moments, while sometimes frustrating, also served to bond the two in their shared mission to raise Sophia as best they could. They learned to compromise, to listen, to value the different perspectives each brought to parenting. One particularly rough night, when Sophia refused to sleep and cried inconsolably for hours, Michael found Emma in the hallway outside the nursery, silent tears running down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, concerned. "Is she sick?" "No," Emma replied, wiping her tears. "I'm just remembering." Michael waited for her to continue. "There were nights like this before, nights she cried and I had nothing to give her. No medicine for a fever, no extra blanket when it was cold, nothing but my empty arms." The raw vulnerability in her confession struck Michael deeply. Without thinking, he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, the first truly compassionate physical gesture between them. "But now you do. We do. Everything she needs." Emma nodded, a small smile forming amid her tears. "Sometimes it still doesn't feel real, like I'll wake up and find it was all a dream." "It's not a dream," Michael assured her. "It's just a new beginning." For all of us, these late-night conversations became more frequent. After Sophia fell asleep, they would meet in the living room, sharing tea and stories. Emma talked about her childhood in a conservative religious family who rejected her when she became pregnant out of wedlock. Michael, to his own surprise, opened up about painful memories of the orphanage, foster families, and how he learned early on to trust only himself. "That's why you understood," Emma realized one night, "why you didn't report me right away. You know how the system is." Michael stared into his tea for a moment before answering. "I know what it feels like to belong nowhere. I wouldn't wish that on any child, especially not Sophia." As the weeks turned into months, something unexpected began to happen. Michael, who had always valued his solitude, found himself looking forward to their family moments. Emma, who had lived so long in fear and uncertainty, began to relax, to trust, to plan beyond the next day. And Sophia, the little soul who had inadvertently united these two unlikely partners, thrived with a security and joy only a truly loved child could display. One Friday evening, Michael arrived home earlier than usual, bringing a small surprise, a children's star projector. "I thought we could set this up in her room," he explained, almost shyly. "I read that it can help with bedtime routines." Instead of protesting or questioning, as she might have weeks ago, Emma smiled. "It's perfect. She loves the stars in the book we read to her." After dinner, the three gathered in Sophia's room. Michael set up the little projector while Emma bathed the baby. When they finally turned off the lights, the ceiling and walls turned into a softly dancing field of twinkling stars. Sophia, lying in her crib, gazed in wonder at the display above her, her tiny fingers trying to catch the lights. Emma sat in the rocking chair nearby, while Michael stood by the door watching wordlessly. Emma extended her hand, inviting him closer. Hesitant, Michael crossed the room and sat on the arm of the chair. Together, in silence, they watched Sophia drift off under the starry projection, her breathing slowly growing deep and steady. There were no tears, no struggle, just a peaceful calm that seemed to envelop all three of them. In that moment, under the dancing stars, they were simply a family. Not conventional, certainly, not planned or expected, but a family nonetheless. And for the first time since Sophia had come into their lives, both Michael and Emma allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, this unlikely arrangement could really work. The autumn sun lit up the gardens of the Thompson mansion, where a cheerful group sang happy birthday to a curly-haired little girl. Sophia Thompson Clark, officially registered with both surnames, clapped enthusiastically in front of the cake decorated with 2 candles. "Blow them out, sweetie," Emma encouraged, kneeling beside the high chair. "Make a wish." Next to her, Michael smiled proudly as he filmed the moment with a professional camera. With the help of both adults, Sophia puffed her cheeks and blew out the candles, to the applause of the gathered guests. A year had passed since the night of revelations that changed everything. A year of adjustments, challenges, and surprisingly, of unexpected joys. The mansion, once a symbol of Michael's isolation, now overflowed with life and color. "I thought we should cut the cake inside," suggested Mrs. Parker, who had stayed on with them, now more like a grandmother figure to Sophia than a housekeeper. Michael nodded, and the small group headed to the living room adorned with balloons and colorful banners. Watching Emma help Sophia open gifts, Michael reflected on how much their lives had changed. 6 months after the revelation, he had created the New Beginnings Foundation, dedicated to providing immediate support for single mothers in desperate situations. Inspired by Emma's story, the program offered emergency housing, medical assistance, legal aid, and employment and education opportunities, his way of ensuring no other mother would have to make the impossible choice Emma had faced. Emma, for her part, found renewed purpose, taking an active role in the foundation. Initially hesitant, afraid of judgment and exposure, she gradually gained confidence. Her experiences became her greatest asset. She could speak with an authenticity no well-intentioned consultant ever could. "Michael, you have to see this," Emma called, pulling him from his thoughts. Sophia had received a small toy piano and was already tapping the keys with surprising focus for her age. "I think we have a future musician," he said, kneeling next to them. Sophia looked up and grinned, a smile that still completely disarmed him. "Papa," she exclaimed, holding out the toy. "Play." Michael pressed a few keys, creating a simple tune that made Sophia clap with delight. Over the baby's head, his eyes met Emma's, sharing a moment of silent understanding that had become common between them. Later, after the guests had left and Sophia was finally asleep, exhausted by the day's excitement, Michael and Emma sat on the terrace with glasses of wine, looking out at the now quiet garden. "She seemed really happy today," Emma commented, a soft smile lighting her face. "She's happy every day," Michael replied. "She has the love of two people who would give anything for her. What more could a child want?" Emma nodded, taking a small sip of her wine. "Sometimes I wonder if this is fair to her, this unconventional arrangement." Michael considered the question for a moment. "What's conventional, as really? I was born into a conventional family that abandoned me at an orphanage. I grew up dreaming of a traditional family I never had," he said, pausing to find the right words. "Sophia has stability, security, and unconditional love. That's more than many children in conventional households ever get." "You always know just what to say to make me feel better," Emma said with a faint smile, visibly relaxing. "I'm just telling the truth." Michael set down his glass. "Speaking of which, Dr. Rivera mentioned that Sophia is developing exceptionally well. She said children who receive consistent attention from multiple caregivers often show advanced social skills." "Multiple caregivers," Emma repeated with a light laugh. "A technical way of describing our unlikely family." The word family lingered between them, weighted with significance. At first, they had been careful with terms like that, unsure of how to define their relationship. Now, a year later, the words slipped out naturally. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be sitting here, celebrating the birthday of a child I consider my daughter, with a woman who—" Michael stopped, suddenly aware of the delicate territory. "A woman who deceived you, and then became your co-parent," Emma finished, always direct when it came to her past. "It's a woman who endured the unthinkable and had the courage to start over," he corrected gently. "A woman I've come to admire deeply." Emma looked away, but not before Michael noticed the blush creeping into her cheeks. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them expected, a partnership rooted in mutual respect, shared purpose, and, most surprisingly, in a quietly growing affection. "The foundation admitted 3 more mothers this week," Emma said, changing the subject. "One of them is only 19, with newborn twins. Abandoned by her boyfriend, rejected by her parents, just like I was. Now she has a chance," Michael replied. "Thanks to you." Emma shook her head. "Thanks to us. I never could have done this alone." Michael reached out, covering her hand on the table. A simple gesture, but meaningful. Such moments of physical contact were still rare between them, always charged with an undercurrent neither was ready to name. "You know what I sometimes think?" Michael asked, looking at the stars. "How the entire course of our lives changed because of a single cry in the night." Emma squeezed his hand gently. "I never believed in destiny," she murmured. "Until now?" Above them, the stars sparkled serenely, silent witnesses to an extraordinary journey no one could have predicted. The next morning, Michael woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. From his bedroom window, he saw Emma and Sophia under the apple tree, picking the last apples of the season. The little one, in her pajamas, sat perched on Emma's shoulders, reaching out her tiny hands to grab the fruit. The scene hit him with unexpected force. This was his life now. Not the solitary existence of an unyielding billionaire, but the full life of a man with a family. A family built not through blood ties, but through deliberate choices, forgiveness, and second chances. As he watched the 2 people who had completely transformed his life, Michael Thompson, the man who barely a year ago did not believe in destiny, finally understood. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as tragedies, and the most extraordinary miracles begin with a simple cry in the night.